Okay, that must be the cue. All right, good evening, folks. We've got a handful of you here joining us for night number 2 of working through our proposed season and regulation changes for Region 5. And tonight we're going to focus on deer, antelope, turkeys, sheep, lion, goat, moose, bear, bison, all the other things besides elk. We will have a little time at the end if we want to spend rehashing through some elk stuff. We had a pretty good turnout last night and had some pretty good dialogue there. So welcome to tonight. We're scheduled to be on from 6:30 to 9. Based on how we do for participation, we'll define when we wrap it all up. So with that, I'm going to start the presentation. So I'd like you to introduce you to the folks that are here with us tonight. So I'm Mike Ruggles. I'm the regional supervisor. And with us, we have Matt Ladd, who is the regional wildlife supervisor, wildlife manager. We also have our wildlife biologist with us tonight. We have Ashley Taylor, who represents the northern part of our district. Megan O'Reilly, who comes off of our east end. Sean Stewart from our southern border, and Justin Paw for our western area of the district. As you can see in the notes on the side, we may kick off to biologists that maybe aren't in the area, but have specialty with different species, particularly tonight, as we have potential to talk about moose, sheep, goat, lion, and bears. That'd be Sean. Deer and antelope would be off to Justin. Megan O'Reilly's got her area, plus is our non-game species specialist. And Ashley Taylor, our elk and upland birds and fur bearers. So with that in mind, we'll start to move on. We've got Robbie Sikora, that's one of our admin support staff, and is here to help us get through all the challenges tonight, if we have any with our technical system in Zoom. So thanks, Robbie, for that. And Robbie, we can see your hands when we get to that point. And then we'll invite you guys in as we go from that in a little bit. And we'll go through that again here in just a few minutes. So what's happening here tonight is this is an opportunity for you folks to see the information that has been prepared by the wildlife biologists in an effort to get into this biennial season change. There's been more changes than normal as we looked at our districts and whether we could combine some of those, particularly for deer and elk, but also an opportunity to kind of open the book on some of the other species as well. So tonight's comment piece is really to get you to comment either online or by email, or you can mail it in to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. So although we're recording tonight, we won't be sending off any transcripts or anything like that. It will be available for the commission and others to look at the video if they want. But it really is information sharing tonight, answering your questions so that you can develop your comments. So how do you go about doing that? Here on the shared screen, if you were to search for FWP and go to our website, on the main page, if you scroll down just a little bit, there'd be a tile that said season setting 2022-2023. Don't expect you to write down the whole address, but there it is. The fwp.mt.gov will get you there, and specifically to the pages with the reg proposals, that would be the web link. Once you got to that point, once you get there, you'd be able to select the species or group of species as you scroll down to the page to be able to select your comments. And at that point, you can review the information that's been provided for some of the reasonings, what the changes are, whether it's in tables or master lists, they're called, that have the language that describes those changes. And then you can scroll down below that and actually click on whatever that piece of information you were looking at and make comments on that directly. Or you can combine your comments, email them to fwpwld@mt.gov, or you can mail them to our standard Helena office. And I would recommend for sorting that you maybe put a note on there that this is attention to the season setting comments, something like that. So not to leave you entirely hanging, we're going to take this opportunity just to run through the website with you folks. And last night we ended up pulling some information up from there, demonstrating other places. Once you went to our homepage, which most of you are probably familiar with, if you were to scroll down, the tile is right there, 2022-2023 regulation proposals. Click on that. And then you'd be able to look at either the statewide deer, elk, antelope. So for this one, last night I clicked on deer and elk. Let's look to see what the antelope one looks like tonight. So you'd be able to look at the map. There's different pages for the maps for the different regions. There's region 5. You'll see that again tonight in the presentation. If you wanted to see the boundary list changes, this would describe all those boundary changes and the legal descriptions of those that are being proposed under the current season setting process. You wanted to see the master list. So this is how I pulled information from this to build the slides for tonight's presentation that would describe what's happening in these particular boundaries. So if you wanted to see the language, what was happening, what new tags were there, what tags were being taken away, how the quotas were developed, that all would be in the master list as an example. And then if you wanted to make a comment, this would be a place right below the antelope piece where you'd be able to select, provide the information there if you'd like. Select the comment. When you hit done, you'll get a note from SurveyMonkey on the screen that says, thank you for putting your comments in, which lets you know that it was received. So that's the way to get to that information. And then I'll just jump into it tonight too. If you're interested in looking at the management plans for these species, if you go to conservation, you can find a lot of the biological information for the different species or programs within FWP, managing animals and critters. So that's a place to get a lot of that information. There were some questions about that last night. So with that, I'll jump back into the presentation. So I'm going to run through these. It's going to be a little bit longer presentation than last night, only because of the number of species that we're looking at. So once we get to the end, we'll open it up for questions and discussion and go from there. So last night we started out talking with elk. So region 5 has 12 deer and elk districts. So it would be in deer and elk. In this case, the proposals resulted in 10 districts, the same as elk. This is also, by the way, the districts that have been adopted for the lion districts. We ended up with combining some of the existing districts. Some of them will remain the same. And we have one that was a district in the mid 1980s and earlier, 565. It's a new one, but it's an old one. And it's that portion that was south of Falls Creek for folks that live or hunt down in that area. Region 5 currently has 37 license types for deer. And those license types are when you open the book and you're looking at the line items, each one of those different lines that talk about a license or a permit is a light LPT, license or permit type. The new proposals ends up with 30 LPTs. And I think if I were to go back and recount, we're really at 29. I caught one of those that shouldn't be in there anymore, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So not quite as a significant change as elk, but still a fair drop in the total number, a 30% decline in the number of options that are there, while still allowing opportunity. Oh, back up. No, there we go. So that's what the map looks like. Take away the mask that we'll be working with for deer and elk. So there's some multi-district hunting district changes that are being proposed. At this current moment, we have 3 different antlerless whitetail licenses that are available or were available. The 598, 597, and 599. Each one of those had a certain number of licenses available, 1,200 for the northern ones, 2,500 for the southern ones, which the total license for those were 4,900 of those. We're proposing to get rid of all of those options and turn it into a single region whitetail deer doe tag permit. And we up the number by just a few hundred. It ends up with a total of 5,200 total licenses by selecting that. So that made a change, opens up where people can go to, they can select where they would like to go throughout the region rather than throughout those 3 other areas. So I'm going to whip through these fairly quickly. We've also got these in Antelope, which is the reason it's going to take a little longer for the presentation tonight. For those of you that are maybe somewhat new into hunting or haven't looked at the regulations in a while, these are the LPTs, these 3 here. There's separation between mule deer and whitetail deer, and then the seasons. So an apply by time, June 1st. In the case of the deer bees, these are available anytime that licenses go on sale, starting March 1st through the final season on December 18th. And there's no quota on those general deer licenses. Here you can see that there's quotas 150 to 5,200. So that 5,200 I explained earlier where that number came from, and then these are district specific numbers. So these changed where we combine those. And so I'll talk a little bit about those when that happened. Just with the quick notes here. We anticipate that there might be a little bit more conversation with antlerless mule deer. Those numbers fluctuate a bit, and management and quotas change a little bit on those. So I've got notes on the antlerless mule deer and whether we change those or not. Once you look over here, there's the early season dates, the archery dates, general season, the muzzleloader dates, any late season dates, and then notes or restrictions within those. So I'm not going to read through each one of these, but I will give the quick, was there a boundary change or not? And if so, what changed? So people can start to become familiar with the new numbers. And in this case, there was no antlerless mule deer change in the quota and no change in the boundary. That district is one of them that didn't change. Moving on to 515, this was a combined district of 570 and 500. And the antlerless mule deers, those licenses were reduced by 40 licenses, with 200 of them available between the two districts. 525, combined district 560 and 520. And the antlerless mule deer opportunity increased by 10 licenses in this. We've gone up to 200. There's the 5,200. District 535. This is combining districts 511 and 530. In this one, in 511, so we've gone up with our antlered buck permits by about 200 licenses if you were to look at the 530 numbers. However, if you looked at 511, that was an unlimited general license. So we've added 200 of those licenses into this, restricting that. This really is in a means to manage the buck to doe ratios. If we have questions on this a little bit later, Ashley can speak to that. And then the antlerless mule deer, we've reduced those by 150 licenses down to 50 for this particular district in the proposal. Here's the one where we've removed a license type. This is in District 540, just off to the west of the 535. Antlerless mule deer was reduced by 10, which essentially made it 0. However, if I were to move this line, it says 50, which is part of our scoping process. And in that scoping process, we got comments that, the mule deer aren't doing real well here. We haven't had game damage complaints for mule deer in that area. And the trend data supports dropping that. Part of that discussion is if you're less than 50, can you go to 50? And if you can't, why should we have those? So there's some tweaking with some of the numbers by that. And that's where this one kind of fell out, that we would drop those off of the list. However, you'll still maintain that general deer opportunities. And then you see the Deer B license for whitetails there. Hunting District 555, we combined District 510 and a portion of 520. And with the antlerless mule deer, there's no change for this district. District 565, this is the new one, that's the old one over in the Upper Boulder. Antlerless mule deer in the 560, 565 now area. The license was didn't apply to taking of does on Forest Service land. So there's really no change, but there's also no opportunity for mule deer does in this one, in the new district. Hunting District 575, no boundary change and no change in the antlerless mule deer licenses. 580, no boundary change, and the antlerless mule deer increases with 10 licenses in this one. Hunting District 590, no boundary change, no change in antlerless mule deer. And again, see this major change here, the 005 rather than the area specific licenses. So and I also remind the biologist and the manager, if I hit something wrong here, as I made some edits today, I welcome them to chime in and get things corrected. So you might catch them correcting me, that's fine. So antelope. So we've ended up, we didn't really change much with the antelope, but we are changing the district numbers so that it reduces confusion between elk and deer district numbers. For the first year, we anticipate there'll be some trying to figure out what district was which district in the past and matching things back up. But we hope that people will adjust to that, but it is to try to clear up some confusion when folks are calling and rattling out some of the numbers. So with these, it's the same upper portions for the columns, the license types. So here's the rename. It was 510. It'll now be 506. We are going to remove the 51030 doe fawn licenses. The current quota had been 100. So there's been some challenges for antelope there. And then when you see this create, so that's just adding in the new name of the district, keeping that number. And that total quota from last year, it was set at 350. That's a reduction by about 100 for that either sex license. You'll see here in some of these that it's a note that there's no change when the districts are combined. And that's simply by adding the two districts there and keeping that same number from last year. Which here's not a quota change for the combined district. So this is District 501 was combined with 513 to create 516. So there's the 516 new one. Everything else stayed the same. The 920 is still valid throughout the region. 526, rename that District 511 to 526. We were also asked when we were looking at it to evaluate where our boundaries are at and to make those the same boundaries comparable with deer, elk, and then also try to find features that maybe don't move around quite so much, like trying to keep off the rivers and sticking to highways. So here's one where we align the northern boundary with I-90 and I-94 instead of the Yellowstone River. And then we remove the doe fawn licenses here. There was a quota of 5, and that was removed for this year's proposals. Rename District 530 to 536. This is a boundary change where we align the southern boundary from the Musselshell River to Highway 12. So on this, and remove the 530 30 doe fawn licenses where that was a small quota of 5 for those. Rename District 500 to 546. Remove the 530 doe fawn license. That quota was 5. It's limited opportunity, but increase the 54620 by 100. Combined hunting district 512 and 514. It created a new hunting district 556. Create a new 55620 license. No quota changes there. So other than the combination of the districts, we ended up with the same numbers. Combined hunting district 550, 560, and 570, which created a new hunting district 576. No quota changes. So that's just an addition of the district quotas from last year. Rename hunting district 590 to hunting district 586. This is one that created some, we have a 590 in elk and deer. So now we're going to change that to 586 to not overlap with that. No quota changes in that particular district. Rename 540 to 596. No quota changes for that. We're going to switch gears and start getting into some of the other species. Turkey. So turkey is a statewide change that would affect us here in Region 5. And that change would be from starting in April 10th and going to May 16th to opening on April 15th, going to May 31st. There's also an allowance of some different calibers as long as they meet some specific velocity requirements and pellet types. And there are no specific changes to Region 5 at this time. Mountain lion, there's been some district changes to match the deer and elk districts. Hunting districts 525, 555, and 565, which I'll show the map here in the next one. Those new proposed names will be combined and then have a total quota of 6 males and 9 females in that area. Hunting districts 502, 515, 535, 575, and 590, so our central and eastern and northern boundaries. Using those new proposed district names, they'll be combined with a total quota of 27 lions from that particular area. So here's what that looks like on the map. So the larger area here, larger area there, and then these districts would remain the same. Black bear, no specific changes other than adding in the hound hunting and the area for the hound hunting. So the hound hunting season start April 15th, go to May 31st in the Bear Management Unit 580 and the portion of the Bear Management Unit 510 east of Highway 310. So down in our southern portion. And then we need to add in a hound training season for June 1st to June 15th in those same areas. There's also one that we're looking at evaluating whether or not folks need to come in and report their bear and allow us to take a tooth for aging. And so there's going to be an opportunity to comment on that and have it so that they can be self pull those teeth. There'd be instructions provided within 10 days of harvest. It'd have to be turned in and report through the harvest reporting line or this other number in Helena within 48 hours of the kill, with within 10 days sending in the biological samples. So we're looking for comment on that as well. Migratory bird. There's a request to look at establishing a light goose conservation order for snow and Ross geese in the spring in the Central Flyway. This would be from March 1st to May 15th. And that conservation order is a season in which those waterfowl could be taken in an effort to reduce their numbers as they're overcrowded and causing problems on their breeding grounds. There are no regional changes being proposed for moose, bighorn sheep, mountain goat, or bison in Region 5. So with that, we'll open it up for discussion. A little more detailed than what we had last night. So based on our participation number, we should have time for at least 2 minutes tonight for anybody that has questions. And then we can circle back if there's additional questions or conversations that folks would like to have. You can raise your virtual hands. Robbie can explain that once we're ready to open for those that haven't done that before. But essentially you would click, raise your hand. We can see that on this end. And then Robbie will open those mics up, invite you in, and then you can unmute your microphone once you're into the meeting and voice your questions or concerns, comments or ideas, and go from there. Remember, we are not taking your comments to turn them in. We'll take them into consideration as we have discussions about proposals and questions that come to us as they're being prepared to go to the commission. But if you really want to be heard and you have some comments with some good suggestions, other thoughts, make sure that you get those written down either on the comment online, email those in, or you can mail in comments just with a written letter, doing it that way. So we'll try to keep our answers fairly brief and stick to the points, try to get those done within a couple minutes. There's the opportunity to chat. We encourage you to, if you got your hand up, to keep your hand up. We'll get to those and not use the chat quite as much, but it's okay to use it. We will have staff that are answering those as we do the meeting, but at some point we'll stop and say, hey, do you want to report back on what discussions have been happening on the chat side of things and share that with the group? So it's not a way to kind of stay out of the side. We'll bring that back in and look. We will go until about 8:30 or so, probably sooner based on participation tonight. And then we can turn into elk or any other topics that folks would like to visit about. And then we can stay as long as 9 o'clock. So as long as you guys need us up to then, we'll be here for you. Excuse me. I do want to remind folks, we're going to have another virtual meeting, and that one's coming up on January 6th. And that will also be with our Citizens Advisory Commission. Good evening to Lee and Doug Dreesen, who are joining us. They're both on our Citizens Advisory Committee, and look forward to their participation on the 6th as well. So at that meeting, the Citizens Advisory Commission will have a short roundtable where they share what they're hearing and seeing in their areas pertaining to season setting and any other thing that seems to be happening in there that we should be aware of. And then we're going to go through a short presentation, kind of the general overview of what we've seen tonight rather than district by district, just kind of the big stuff, and then invite the public in with the Citizens Advisory Group to have the same discussions that we're having tonight and see if there's any changes or new ideas that have come in as well. We are also working on having an in-person meeting where the biologists would likely join us virtually. If they want to come to the office, they can. I think we're starting to settle on January 13th that evening here at our office in Billings, but more information to come. Bob Gibson will get out a news release for us early next week, and all that information will be there, and we'll get that posted up on our website as well. So if you've got friends that are tired of Zoom or are not participating because everything's on Zoom, that'll be an opportunity for them to join us. We'll have the staff be in there able to answer questions. They'll just be on our screen unless they come in. So be looking for that news release as we go. So with that, Robbie, if you want to give a quick, hey, this is how you get your hands up. I see we've got Chris has already started. We can get on and we'll go from there.
Yep. Thanks, Mike. Yes. So for those of you that don't know, at the bottom of the screen, if you move your cursor dead center, there's just a button that says raise hand. Pretty straightforward, and I'll keep an eye on that. So with that, Chris, welcome back. Go ahead with your question.
Hi guys, thanks for doing this again. I got a few things I'd like to ask about. Have they put any consideration into going once in a lifetime with the big three?
I think, Chris, I think that has been discussed in the past, but I don't know that ever got much momentum. Sean is our moose, sheep, goat specialist, and he may be able to contribute to my thoughts a little more on that. But
I mean, it just seems like with the growing population and the losing population we're having of the wildlife, and for those that, even if we did it, the odds would still be so far. But I mean, you'd almost have to, if you did it, if we could go back the 7 years for the guys in the penalty box and start there, I'd love to see it retroactivated, but that's never going to happen.
Yeah, the problem with retroactivated is you got guys that, as soon as a person, they can purchase a bonus point or a bonus point for that the following year, and they can purchase bonus points the 7 years that they're taking off. So you would have those outstanding bonus points. That would be.
Yeah. I mean, I know it would take a long time to amount to anything, but looking at my boys, they're never going to get to do this statistically.
Yeah, I hear you. I've had the same thought.
I mean, it would be cool if they could do like Idaho, where say I drew a ram tag this year and I decided not to harvest my ram, I could still be eligible to draw a ram since I didn't fill the tag. It doesn't have to be just done, because I think everybody should get an opportunity to harvest, but not everybody's going to get an opportunity to hunt.
Right. Yeah. And Idaho doesn't do bonus points, right?
No,
correct?
they don't. And you can't put in for deer or elk, and you can only put in for one. I mean, their whole thing's totally different from this.
Right.
That's just a little part that I like and seems like it would sell better with people.
Yeah.
Granted, your odds of pulling, a moose tag twice are pretty slim.
Chris, I think, again, we're going to emphasize that you guys make your comments in the comment forum and, but via email. However, one thing I would tell you is make sure, that you're kind of articulating your reasoning in your comment. Just don't do like a 1 sentence comment. Make sure you articulate the things that you're thinking about.
I want to sit down and type it up and maybe have somebody else read it, because I'm not the most grammar efficient person, I guess you could say.
Well, that's okay. We want them to be heard, Chris. And, sitting here and talking about your reasoning with us, like we emphasized last night, commenting on this format doesn't get your comments officialized. So make sure you get that stuff written down and, put it together, and you got some time to do that. So,
yeah. And then my other question would be,
hey, Chris, before you leave that, this is Sean. You need to recognize that what you're talking about requires legislative action. That is not something that was within the power of the commission.
I got you.
So
it
has been discussed as recently as one of the last legislative sessions. I don't remember if it was this last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but it has been discussed. There was a bill in specifically for bighorn sheep, I believe, and that was shot down by the legislature at that time. Doesn't mean it can't be revisited.
Yeah, it's just, it cracks me up when I talk to people about this stuff, because like I said, I put in for 9 different states last year. Like, I read a lot of regulations and spend a lot of time looking at stuff, and everybody's got the, well, this is how it's always been, but Montana's changed. It isn't what it was 30 years ago. You know, look at the changes we've made in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So my other question, I guess, would be about the deer season. Has there been any talk of like knocking a couple weeks out and trying to save some of our rutted up bucks from just getting blasted from a hood of a pickup?
You know, Region 4 has had some shorter seasons in the past, and actually for them, they've been actually going away from those seasons, Chris. And I think I don't really recall what the biology was on it, but I don't know overall if they saw a reduction in bucks with a 5-week season compared to a 3-week season. And maybe the biologist can correct me on that, but I do seem to think I remember that when they compared those two, that it really didn't help the buck overall numbers. And I may be incorrect on that, but maybe the biologists have heard or know what I'm referring to.
I wouldn't be surprised if you're not still getting a guy who's going to shoot just whatever on the last day. It still has a last day of season.
Yeah.
So
the other thing that factors into that is over the last 10 years or so, we've done a couple of public surveys, surveying sportsmen about some of those very questions. And overall, the support was for the 5-week season. There was really very limited support from the sportsmen to shorten the season to a 3-week season.
I just,
public survey is another thing that
yeah,
looking at.
it's just with the advancements that rifles have made in the last 10 years and the way this state's grown in the last 3, I don't think a lot of people are actually looking outside of their hunting camp, if you will.
Sean, maybe I might be thinking of the Newell and Meredith research that was done on that. Are you familiar with that? Wasn't that kind of the determination that they came up with?
If I recall correctly, those 3-week seasons up in north central Montana resulted in essentially the same harvest as the 5-week season.
Right.
Yeah, Sean, this is Justin. I was just going to chime in with that too. Having talked to the biologists up there a little bit about that, they felt that there was very little overall change in the mule deer harvest. That harvest that they saw in the 5-week season was just compressed down into a 3-week season with very little overall reduction in buck harvest.
So there probably wouldn't really be much interest in cutting a couple weeks out and going with more of like a short range type of weapon where people have to actually hunt instead of dope a scope.
It hasn't been publicly supported, Chris. I guess that might be the best way to say that.
Yeah. I'm sure some of you guys understand where I'm coming from with that.
Right. Yeah, we understand your thought process there. Yep.
So, all right, guys. Well, I'm over my time, I'm sure, but that's about all I really wanted to question.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
I appreciate it.
We do have Andrew S. Asked a question in the comments. If I'll read that out loud, and I can actually unmute Andrew if he wants to go further on that. But Andrew asked, has there been any conversation about going back to having to front the money, talking about the big 3, moose, sheep, goat, to front the money for the draws. I would assume this would help a little with the draw odds for these tags.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier today here in the office, and it's we haven't heard that very much, and it was pretty well accepted when we switched, and it reduces the need to send back, and it didn't really, if I recall, didn't really change the number of folks that were putting in or not putting in. Sean, does that ring a bell? I wasn't paying near enough attention back then when that happened, but that was the gist, if I recall, from some of our regional staff meetings.
I think you've got that basically right. It's not something that I've paid a lot of attention to either, so I may not be the best person to ask on that, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, it's worth putting in for the comments, but I don't think the licensing piece backs up the change, and so.
Yeah, and I think some of that initially that was changed over to where you didn't have to front the money to kind of make more opportunity for folks that maybe don't have quite as deep a pockets to go ahead and put in and apply for those things. And then if they did, you know, they were lucky in the draw and drew one, that they could maybe come up with some family members or somebody to help them out so they could get the money to, you know, purchase those tags. So I think, Andrew, it was done in part in that discussion when that occurred. That was part of the discussion, was to kind of help folks that maybe wouldn't have that pocket full of money all at one shot to apply for all three or something like that.
And I think that was the fear, is it would just generate a lot more people applying and then trying to figure it out later. And I don't think it ended up really resulting in that many more new applicants. So
yeah,
we can double check that too. And that would be worth commenting, because we're kind of shooting off the cuff from things that we've heard here probably 7-8 years ago or better. So we might be a little off on that, but that's kind of the recollection that we've had on that one. So good question, Andrew. And that was one we were batting around earlier today too. So.
All right, thanks for the question, Andrew. Anybody else out there have any questions? Oh, go ahead, Brad.
There, I assume I'm live.
Yep, go ahead, Brad.
Okay, just real quick on what you were just talking about. Back when I served on the Fish and Game Committee for the House, which is, you know, like 20, 30 years ago, depending on when I started and when I finished. The issue that was just raised about having everybody front all the money for a tag, the big push back then was to do what we're doing. There were so many complaints from people, not only of lower income, but if you had 2 or 3 kids and a wife, to put in for 5 for all 3, you know, times 3 came out to be more than most people's house payment. And it was a disincentive. I don't know that the numbers went up or down, but it makes it a lot easier for people to participate. And I would be in favor of keeping it the way it is and looking at other options. One of which is, and this would be for at least 2 of the big 3 and maybe all 3, because nanny goats are a little hard to distinguish at a couple 100 yards. But what I would like to see kicked around, I'm not sure if it's strictly legislative, I probably should know, but I don't. And that is, instead of 10% set aside for non-residents, have by species, have 10% set aside by species by gender. For instance, if you had 10 ram tags in a certain area and 30 ewe tags, total of 40, non-residents theoretically could draw 4 of those. If you went with 10% by gender, they would get 1 of the ram tags and 3 of the ewe tags. Of course, they don't put in for ewes, but that would increase the odds, not by much, but a little bit, giving some primacy to residents. I am concerned, or at least quizzical, as to what the push was for air rifles for turkeys. I'm not exactly sure that powder actuated was defined somewhere, required somewhere. Who pushed for air rifles for turkeys and why? And my next to the last one here is, this happened more in the elk, I think, than the deer. But anytime you're getting down to eliminating an opportunity in an area, you know, you're going to zero bull tags, cow tags, buck tags, whatever. I would like to see some of that left in for 12 to 15-year-olds. I think giving an opportunity to young people in an area with low hunting pressure, because they're the only ones there, acknowledges that these are the future of hunting. These are our future Second Amendment rights aficionados. These are the people that must be inspired early on to love wildlife and wilderness and the hunting sport, and to leave them out because things are a little tight somewhere and another 3 or 4 does or 2 bucks might get taken by them, I think is short-sighted. And last but not least, I'm not really seeing anything or hearing anything about using hunting to help control the spread of CWD by thinning out numbers. I'm seeing the same thinning out of whitetail as I've always seen, but it doesn't seem to be ramped up for the purpose in certain areas of reducing population, so they're not touching noses quite as much. The bucks aren't traveling near as much, you know. And I'd like to have that addressed. Thank you for your time.
Thanks,
All
Brad.
right, Brad. So that's, I think, 3 questions, if I got that right. So the turkey question. And so whoever wants to grab that one can grab that one. Opening up to youth hunters. And then the last one with addressing CWD and how we've managed tags or not managed tags to address that. So.
Yeah, the turkey one, Brad, that's something I'm gonna have to get back in touch with you on. I'll do a little background and research on that. Mike and I were actually discussing that topic today too, as to where that air rifle, suggestion came from or proposal was generated from. Our speculation was maybe that it was over in kind of some of the more urban areas in Region 1 where they are really trying to reduce turkey numbers, and maybe the air rifles were a thought to do that more safely in those areas over there. But that is purely speculation on my part. So
Matt, this is Ashley. That's correct. If you it's on that commission meeting. I forget the exact name of the sportsman group, but it's out of the Flathead. And that's exactly why they proposed it. It was their proposal at the commission meeting to add that air rifle, and they provided the standards for the air rifle that they thought would be the best fit as a minimum. But I don't remember their exact name, but it was a group out of the Flathead that was bringing that. And it was because of the wanting to decrease turkeys, but in a safer way for the urban development around them.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yep.
Ashley, let me ask you this. So did they purposely include air rifle because it should have been covered under rifle as it is in our regulations, but did they purposely include the air rifle so they could put limitations on the caliber and feet per second and things like that? Is that?
I think so. If I remember the commission meeting correctly, they had some justification for why they were specifically pulling out air rifle and making those specifics. And I think that was the reason.
Okay.
Okay. And then the youth hunting piece for areas where we've removed opportunity for specific gender or species.
And I can respond to that a little bit. Typically in areas where we go to antlered buck mule deer season for population, because the populations are low. We have a youth season for either sex mule deer in those areas to continue to maintain that opportunity for the youth. Doesn't make that much difference in terms of harvest, but it certainly is valuable to the youth, and it's valuable to some of the ranchers too. We've had good support from the ranchers on continuing that either sex youth harvest.
Yeah, and so here I pulled up 580. So I had noticed that on there, there's youth ages 10 to 15 where they can get out on either sex mule deer. And so that's kind of what Sean's talking about. So we do have some of those opportunities. So
575 has that as well, if I'm not mistaken.
yep, there it is. So yep.
Mike, can you summarize the CWD question real quick so we can?
Yep. So the CWD question, I know that we've had conversations about why we maintained or went higher with some of our quotas in our southern districts for sure, rather than dropping. And so some discussion about, why aren't we either opening up more or what are we actually doing for CWD management? And then we could actually talk about the Dillon stuff where those hunts were there. When we first had CWD hit here, we opened it up more too. So I think he's just looking for some more information about what we've been doing to address that. And it maybe doesn't just jump out at you when we're going through it the way we are with our season setting. So
I can speak a little bit about the hunt that we had here when we first detected CWD in the southern part of Region 5. And I know Sean and all the other biologists can as well. But the southern portion of Region 5, we didn't really have a lot of sample opportunity with the number. Well, first of all, 510 was under permit for mule deer bucks. And so that made the sample size a little bit lower due to the fact that those were permitted. Additionally, we didn't have that many B tags available in 510 at that time. I don't really remember what the B tag numbers were like in 502 and the southeastern portion of 520. As I recall, reviewing those numbers, there just weren't that many opportunities to get samples from deer harvested during the 5-week season or the archery season during that period. As a result, it was the first, truly detected hunter harvest CWD cases in the state at that time. And the thought was to, see what the prevalence of CWD was across that area. So that's why the hunt was proposed, so we could get more samples. So we had a bigger sample size to work off of for prevalence. And that, Sean, does that sound correct?
Yeah, we needed to get a certain sample of both mule deer and whitetail to give a good statistical analysis of what the prevalence was. So that was the purpose of that hunt. Subsequently, we've made some significant changes in 510, former 510, 502, and a portion of 520. In that, those populations of deer, in 510 we went away from the buck permit to a general either sex season. Specifically, we want to reduce buck-doe ratios. We want to reduce the age distribution of those bucks, take out some of those older bucks, and overall maintain lower deer densities. 502 is a hunting district where the deer populations have been pretty low. It should be in a restricted season type, which would be antlered buck only and minimal B tags for antlerless deer. Instead of that season type that would be recommended in the AHM, CWD trumps that. And we have a general either sex season with a substantial number of B tags in there. The same applies to what used to be the very eastern end of 520. So that whole area, that's kind of the core CWD area around Belfry, in the southern part of the region. Our deer management is very much directed by CWD. And again, it's reduced deer densities, reduce older age bucks, reduce buck doe ratios overall.
Thanks. I see we got Doug's got his hand up. So
Yeah. Go ahead, Doug. I'll get it here. Sorry, Doug, I accidentally muted you there. Go ahead whenever you're ready. We can't hear you, Doug. I don't know if you're talking, but you gotta unmute yourself.
yeah, well, he's working on that. We've got an
There we
animal
go.
question.
Got it.
Oh, you got him? There he goes.
Go ahead, Doug.
There you go, Doug.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead, Doug. You're good.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment while it's fresh in my mind here regarding to Chris's comment about once in a lifetime for like moose, sheep and goat. This was brought up last year, or the last legislative session regards bighorn sheep. Executive Director of the Montana Wild Sheep Foundation pulled a bunch of figures together and determined that there wasn't hardly any difference of applying like we do now versus once in a lifetime. This was all presented to the legislature in testimony, along with several other people in regards to this, and it was defeated. If Chris needs some information on this, I just suggest that he goes to the Montana Wild Sheep Foundation website and hone in on Brian Solon. He's the executive director who compiled all this information, and pretty good stuff there. Okay.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah.
Kind of on that same boat, Andrew kind of had a follow-up question he said, in Idaho, you have to pick a species to put in for the big three. You cannot put in the draw for all three in the same year. This would help with the draw odds with not having everyone putting in for all three species. Has anything like this ever been brought up?
Matt, you want to take a stab at that one? I have not heard that come up. Doesn't mean that it's not a valid comment and that it should get in there, but I haven't heard that one being batted around. Maybe
Yeah,
some
I would have
bios
to-
or something too.
Yeah, I would have to echo what you just said, Mike, on that. Unless somebody else on the panel here knows anything different.
I don't remember anything like that coming up. Again, I believe that would require legislative action. It's not something the commission could do.
Chris had a question about why the heritage season the muzzleloader heritage season did not include or wasn't valid for antelope. And again, Chris, that one, the muzzleloader heritage season was also a legislative action with very specific rules on that to elk and deer. So again, that one is a legislative one. That wouldn't hurt to, make a comment on that. I mean, getting your word out is fine, but that's not a commission decision.
I'm gonna go back to Doug here real quick. I might have cut him off earlier. Go ahead, Doug.
You hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, furthermore, comment that, folks apply for permits for a long time, and that's kind of the history of sheep, moose, and goat applicants in the state of Montana, because a lot of people are trying to draw a limited sheep tag, for instance. However, I'd like to point out that Montana provides a great opportunity to anybody, and it's envious of all the western states that we have an unlimited sheep district where anybody can get a license and go hunting sheep in unlimited areas. And here in this district, we have 3 of them, from Red Lodge clear over the Big Timber. So there is opportunity there if somebody wants to hunt bighorn sheep. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Doug. Good point. Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
I guess I get that what he's saying. If you started filtering people out, because of the numbers to people that apply to the number of tags that are drawn for, say, sheep, it might only go from 2 to 2.1%, but that's huge. And it's also, by going to once in a lifetime, you would take, that guy couldn't get a tag again if he filled it, or, if they did it that way, or somebody else would get an opportunity. Or some of these units are only given 1 or 2 tags. I mean, there's just not enough to go around for a guy to be able to do it more than once. I don't know. I mean, as far as the moose goes, I put in for 4 states for moose tags. Like, I want to kill a moose. It's on my bucket list, the animal I want. And if going once in a lifetime gives me 0.1% more of a chance, like, I think it would be a phenomenal thing.
Yeah, Chris, the bottom line is those are very limited resources, and I would encourage you to take a look at that data that Doug Dreesen mentioned on the Wild Sheep Foundation website, and kind of look through that. And like you said, it might be a fraction of a chance. And the overall issue there is they're very limited resources, and it's, an incredible privilege to hunt them.
I totally get that, but even if I still never see it, if they do that, somebody else might get to, or you wouldn't have somebody who's drawn it 2, maybe 3 times.
Right.
I mean, that Jason Metzinger's drawn a Rams tag twice, and he'll be eligible to put in for a 3rd one. And how many guys are going to be in their 60s and have never got the opportunity?
Yeah, we hear you.
So that's it. Thank you, guys.
Chris, did you had another question you had typed on there? Did you want to go into that one at all?
If you guys want to, I hunted region 7 during rifle at a cow tag. I put off the deer hunting. I had almost no interest in deer hunting due to the heritage season. But with the amount of pressure and the lack of deer that I seen down there, and all the non-resident pressure, why aren't we putting the non-residents in more of a chokehold, I guess, and trying to keep them all from flooding to, say, 7 or 6, up on the Canadian line, and try and mitigate and spread out the pressure. I mean, we're the only state that's given non-residents a 3-month run at 80 to 90% of our state.
So are you are you commenting to say that they should be held to a specific season or a specific hunting district?
A district would be a great start. Because I don't think I would love to see it to a season, but everybody would be so worried that would be a slippery slope and eventually go into the resident side of the world. But at least that way we don't go down to, the 700 region and see 53 Wisconsin plates and 29 Michigan plates. I just feel like you get a lot of people that hunt those areas because it's the first place they can hunt when they come into the state. So that's where they go, because they don't want to drive another 5 hours to hunt a different part of the state.
Yeah, that's part of it. And, Chris, that is a complaint and, some comment that we heard a fair amount this year especially was, and I know Mike mentioned that he was hearing that quite a bit about just the number of non-resident plates in certain areas. And one other thing about Eastern Montana is it's a big attraction. It's gotten a lot of social media attention. It has a lot of public land that's available and, fairly easy to access. Overall, over many, many, many years, it's been good hunting for a lot of people and it's become very popular and all those things that, attribute to that. But,
And
not a bad comment for you to make. And,
I don't blame them because where I elk hunt in Colorado, it's the closest place I can get to.
right.
That's why we started hunting there. It's the closest place. We kill bulls in there. But so I understand why it is the way it is. But also on that token, Colorado won't let me just go drive through their state and hunt the way we do.
Yeah. So I know with some of the conversations, there's, nothing's in this season setting proposal. A lot of these, some of it's got some history, but this year maybe a bit more frustrating for folks. And so that's being heard more. And I know there's been some discussions about, what are we as an agency thinking about how to manage that? So, we might see something in the future that maybe looks a little different, so having your comments in there helps maybe frame that question and start that assignment maybe a little bit more in earnest too. So
I mean, I would love to see it choke down more for everybody, residents and non-residents. But like you guys have said, the whole state's not going to sign off that. And that would just be a great starting point where maybe it fixes it enough that everybody's happy for a while.
Yep. And you're seeing that with some of the deer licenses and elk licenses being proposed that, this is an area, if you draw that, that's the only area that you can hunt bulls or the only area that you can hunt bucks. And so that's expanded a bit than what we've had in the past. And so that's one of them that's running out in some of these districts that as people are looking, they're seeing. And so that is being explored a little bit. So we'll see how some of that goes too. So
it is. I hate to see it take opportunity from residents when we could be basically passing the burden onto a non-resident, if you will.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to come to Montana and hunt. You guys are going to sell the tags. Why not disperse them and make them drive some to the other side of the state to hunt? Because they're going to still come.
yeah. So Matt, you and I were talking earlier, Robbie, you guys were digging into the cap on non-residents. And
Yep.
so maybe hit that too. So we didn't probably hit that quite as well as we could.
Yeah. So last night, there was a lot of discussion on the unlimited and non-residents and the 10% and if that was calculated. And, Ron was able to dig that out for us and determine that, excuse me, unlimited permits. There's not a 10% cap for non-residents on unlimited permits. However, what I failed to, go into and mention a little bit is there is a cap on non-residents, and for elk, the things that would fall, where elk permits could be utilized for non-residents, they either have to draw a big game combo or an elk combo. And those are pooled, both of those are pooled into a total pool of 17,000. So non-residents for those two combination licenses are limited to 17,000 total. And then for deer, the deer combo license, non-residents on deer are limited to 8,000. So there is, there are some sideboards to the number of non-residents that are coming to the state to hunt. I just wanted to get that information out to you because we didn't cover it last night. And I didn't want the perception to continue on that it just any non-resident could come and, get an unlimited archery permit and away they went, because that's just not the case. It is limited somewhat by the 17,000 cap.
What kills me about that whole thing is the way people complain about it and blame the non-residents. And I think we have more resident plates than we've ever had, and people aren't moving to this state to sit in a coffee shop. They're moving here to recreate outdoors.
Yeah.
And a lot of this pressure we're seeing, I feel like, is out of staters that have become in-staters. And that's what I meant by the state's changing. This whole thing's changing. You know, we need to evolve with it.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yep, and those discussions have started up in the Helena area, the headquarters too, and so, but nothing moved forward in this season setting process. We were already pretty well into down the road, you know, when those comments are really coming in, so.
Yeah,
it'd be
I get it,
good to
man.
frame it.
It helps too that we're coming out of hunting season right now and everybody's frustrated because their favorite spot was overrun with guys this year and this, that, and the other.
Yep.
So I don't know. I feel like our deer are hurting. You know, I hunted hard during that muzzleloader season and I seen one little decent 4-point and I didn't even want to shoot him. And I'd seen a lot of deer. So it just, I don't know. We're going to have to change. We're going to have some problems down the road, I feel like. So,
Yep.
thank you guys.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for your comments.
Yep.
We got any other comments from the group? I think we've kind of circled into elk too, so I think it goes without saying that it's an open floor at this point. So if there's anything else, we're happy to take those. And if not, we can wait a few minutes and then we can call it. Just remind folks that there'll be another opportunity on January 6th in the evening. That one will be all virtual. And then we're working on, it appears to be, and don't hold me to this, the week of the 10th of January, but looking at that Thursday, the 13th is most likely being the in-person date. We're going to try to finalize that on Monday. And then we'll get a news release out on that. So that'll be an opportunity in the region to come and do a face-to-face for those folks. So if you've got people that you've talked to that, you know, still have some questions and want to come in and kind of work through those, that'll be an opportunity for folks that don't like this Zoom format to do that. So.
And that would be at the office here in the PMR room, right?
Correct. Yep. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
How come so late in the week for that meeting?
One of the bottom lines is I have another meeting that I can go to on the 10th and 11th on some
Gotcha.
other topics. I didn't want to have it later in that week at first because the comment period ended the 14th, but with the extension to the 21st, that kind of
Okay.
gets us there. So part of it's
All right.
personal, part of it, you know, we got that
Well,
extension to the 21st.
That's
So.
why I'm asking, because it is for me too. I appreciate you guys doing that. I'm not going to be able to make that time frame. Is why I was curious.
Yep. Yeah.
So-
No, that's originally we were kind of thinking the 10th, but it really was kind of biting my opportunity to go help out with this other group. And so this
I-
kind of opens
I
it
get
up.
it. We're doing a big annual ice fishing trip, so it's not much of a option for me either.
Yep.
So
No.
my
Yeah.
own doing.
Hey,
And we're going to
Chris,
cover the same information here. It's the same agenda. The presentation will probably be more like the CAC one, which is going to be, I'm going to remove the district slides and have the stuff that covers multiple districts. By that point, I hope people have kind of gone through. I'll have the slides to be able to run to if somebody's got a particular question for a district, but you know, it'll be kind of that 10,000 foot level and then open it back up. That'll probably be the same presentation on the 13th as we do on the 6th. So
So you guys are switching it up though. So like say 575 will be deer, elk, and antelope now. Like it'll all be the same unit. Is that the goal?
no, it won't be the same in antelope. It'll have a different number, but it won't end in a 0 or a 5. It'll end in a 6 for antelope, if I got all that right. So
But it will have the same. The 575 will be the same.
for deer and elk and lion.
In lion.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right.
I can run back to that antelope map here.
I just thought, I've always wondered why that was different and thought it would be great if they were matched up, if you would.
Yep, we had that conversation. We tried to do that management wise. Last night you heard a little bit about, you know, it's a challenge for deer. It worked well for elk and vice versa.
Yeah.
And Sean shared with us early on, you know, because it was, you know, hey, we need to look at this from an elk perspective and then move out to deer. And Sean said, well, really, these districts were, you know, set up looking at deer originally. and then elk coming in, if I caught that right. And
Yeah.
so we kind of mixed those two together. And then antelope, we just had some of those districts that had the same numbers, which it would create confusion for folks. And then they would end up in Robbie's shop asking questions, and it was hard
Oh, yeah.
sometimes. So, you switched to antelope. Oh, I thought we were talking elk. And so yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things there, Chris, too, is, the boundaries on antelope don't necessarily, and the district size on antelope doesn't necessarily,
It doesn't all jive.
Yeah, doesn't all jive with what the deer elk boundaries are. Yeah. Hey, another thing I was going to mention too, as far as the in-person stuff, and I understand you're not going to be able to attend that one, but I don't know where you live, but if ever you're in Billings or something and want to stop by and talk in person on some of this stuff, that's not a problem at all. And we're happy to answer your questions and kind of work through questions with you. And if we don't have the answers for them, we'll do our best to try to figure those out and getting back in touch with you too, Chris. So don't feel like you're left out in the dark, or we're not going to pay attention to you or anything like that. Just, feel free to come in, and we're here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So
I just kind of figured this is one of those things that if I don't get on here and voice an opinion, I don't really have an opinion when the dust settles.
Well, no, and it brings, those, when you talk about stuff and bring things up, it just, it pops the light bulbs on for us too, about different ideas and things that, come to mind that maybe we haven't thought about that much. So all of this stuff's really appreciated. And this is how we make things better. So we appreciate you.
Well, for what it's worth, I've got a buddy that lives in Wyoming, and the unit he's in, they're dealing with the exact same elk issue we are. They have a monster ranch that's outfitted. They're like 900 or 800% over, and they can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
This year, they actually implemented a 4-point or less branch antlered bull tag to try and help, because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not just us, man. I mean, everywhere is dealing with this to a degree.
Yeah. All Western states are dealing with something similar to this that, have elk, Chris, and it's, a lot of it's, let's face the facts, it's privatization or the access issues with elk, and it depending on what state you're in. So it's and when you have 8,000 elk standing on private property and you have limited access to them, it's just very difficult to manage them from a biological standpoint.
Well, and it just boils down to money. There's too much money in elk.
Yeah.
So they did that this year, and I don't even know if it really made much of a dent in their issue they're having. Because as you guys are well aware, like, the cows are the issue.
Yeah, and point restrictions, and having hunters try to count points in the heat of the battle when they're out there trying to kill an elk, it leads to an enforcement nightmare. And guys make mistakes, and they're honest mistakes, and they do things, and hunters and sportsmen do things in the heat of the battle, and they're honest mistakes, and those are just tough, really tough things to deal with. And I really pray we never get to situation where we're dealing with stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't know, like last night when I brought up maybe giving the landowners a separate tag for just their ranch, like, I hadn't really put much thought into it till I mentioned it, but I really do like the idea of having something you could give them that doesn't have a dollar value. Everybody I talk to, all the stuff that they tried pushing through the legislation, we all seen it as a money grab when they're like, oh, we're going to give them 10 landowner tags and this and that. It was just, people get terrified that it's going to turn into a Utah thing and they're going to be selling those tags for 20,000 a piece when you hear they're giving landowners 10 tags.
Yeah. Hear you.
So I know, like I said, I don't want to bash on you guys or anything. Well, I'm going to get off here and have some dinner. You guys have a great night.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a good New Year's, Chris.
Yep. Bye.
Yep. All right. If we've got anybody else that wants to join in, sharing some discussion, feel free to, there we go, Brad.
Oh, Brad did have his hand up there. You have a question, Brad? Go ahead.
I just wanted to sign off and tell you guys that I appreciate the time you put into this and giving us the opportunity to sign off, even though it might not go verbatim to other ears. It speaks to your ears, and it takes some time. So happy New Year's and many blessings to all.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Thank
Catch
you,
you
Brad.
later. All right, anyone else?
No written comments, no hands raised at the moment.
All right, folks, we're going to take that as the Happy New Year's wish. For those of you that we'll see on the 6th, we'll see you then. Hope you have a good New Year's. And again, thanks to all the biologists for the hard work. There was a lot of parts and pieces rolling through this. Having them be able to back Matt and myself up here has been great. So you guys have a good New Year's too. And thanks for getting all those numbers through for the next round of requests for the budget work. So yep. All right.
Thanks a lot.
Everybody have a good night.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, guys.